Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, South African lawmakers vote in favour of closing down the Israeli embassy in Pretoria and suspending all diplomatic relations until a ceasefire is agreed in the Middle Eastern country's war with Palestinian Islamist group Hamas in Gaza. Also, a tragic pause thrown over victory celebrations for Liberia's president-elect after a car fatally rams into a crowd of supporters in the capital. At least 3 are killed, over a dozen are injured. And mental health campaigners scale up their push to decriminalise suicide in Africa. Across the continent, there are at least 11 countries where it remains a crime, and that, researchers say, actually leads to more people trying to take their lives. We hear from the Africa coordinator for mental health charity Lifeline. But first, South Africa's parliament has voted to distance itself diplomatically from Israel by backing a motion to close the Middle Eastern country's embassy in Pretoria and suspend relations. Tensions have mounted over Israel's retaliatory attacks on Gaza. The war was first triggered by an attack on Israel by Palestinian extremist group Hamas, in which 1,200 people were killed. Since then, more than 14,000 people in the Gaza Strip have been killed by Israeli forces. South Africa's government has the final say on whether to follow through with the motion backed by lawmakers. The country, though, has long supported the Palestinian cause. Our Eunice Masson tells us more.
So that aid and other basic services such as food and medicines.
The National Assembly in South Africa has passed a motion of closing its Israeli embassy in the country. It follows after the economic freedom fighters brought forward the motion last week in Parliament. Today, an overwhelming majority of 248 voted in favour, while 91 voted against it. Now, the South African government has tried to balance its position between Israel and the Palestinians when it offered to mediate peace since the war started on 7th of October. However, since then, the government has withdrawn its own ambassador in Israel and also called last week for a warrant of arrest of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, the main opposition party, the DA, today argued that by voting in favour of closing the embassy is contradicting the ANC's stance to mediate peace.
Eunice Masson there for us. Now, at least 3 people were killed after a car ploughed into crowds celebrating the outcome of the presidential election in Liberia. Crowds had gathered outside of the home of President-elect Joseph Boakai's home in Monrovia when the driver rammed into them. It's not clear whether the crash was politically motivated. Clarisse Fortuné tells us more.
The remains of celebrations that ended tragically. A burnt-out car that the night before had ploughed into a crowd. People had gathered in front of the Unity Party headquarters in the center of the capital Monrovia to celebrate Joseph Boakai's presidential victory.
We were in front of our party headquarters celebrating and nobody was paying attention. He turned off the car light, drove towards us and accelerated with a kind of heavy sound, and others were still not paying attention. I was laying myself against the crowd and shouting for people to take care.
He opened the car doors and turned off the lights, and then he just ran into everybody. People shouted, "Give way, give way," but the loud music did not allow them to hear, and there was no light for people to see. People fled and scattered all over.
3 people died, and many were injured, some in critical condition. The police calls what happened an accident and urged UP supporters to remain calm while investigations are underway. The suspected driver has been arrested. The incident followed an election that was deemed largely peaceful, and the Electoral Commission had declared that afternoon that the former vice president had won with 50.64% of the votes. The UP said it was cancelling all celebratory gatherings until further notice.
Mental health campaigners have scaled up their push to decriminalise suicide on the continent. Across Africa, there are at least 11 countries where it remains a crime. Researchers say, though, that such laws actually lead to more people in distress trying to take their lives, as the legislative taboo makes it harder for them to ask for support when they need it. For now, the focus is on Nigeria and Malawi. Just last week, Nigeria adopted a national suicide strategic plan. It looks like the political will for change is in the pipeline. With me now for more on this is Dr. Taiwo Lateef, the African coordinator for Lifeline International. Dr. Lateef, thanks so much for speaking to me again. So when it comes to Nigeria, what do you think's led to this shift that appears to be happening there? And more generally across the continent, how will decriminalisation address the suicide crisis that the African continent's seeing?
Well, thank you very much. Decriminalisation of suicide has a very big role in addressing the crisis that we have in our hands on the continent of Africa regarding suicide, especially youth suicide. It is the first step. And like you said in the news, it's the first step that has heralded the political will of the government to address the issue of suicide. Criminalization of suicide does not allow people to seek help. It's a barrier for help seeking, and it's also a barrier for people to render help. So if you are able to decriminalize suicide, people will be able to come out without fear of being jailed, without fear of being punished, to be able to seek help. And people will be able to render help without fear of being arrested and the fear of being jailed for at least 1 month in the prison. So criminalization is a very, very important step towards providing prevention measures for suicide on the continent of Africa. And
what interventions have led to this shift that we've seen in Nigeria particularly?
Yes, quite a number of things. Very importantly, the political will of the government, which has to do with the leadership of the Ministry of Health that we currently have, that is sympathetic to people who have issues of suicide and mental health challenges. Secondly, the advocacy for suicide prevention in Nigeria, the voice has become very, very loud. And people, especially civil society organizations, are really making a lot of advocacy campaign regarding suicide prevention. Thirdly, the crisis, suicide has become a crisis in Nigeria, especially among youth. You see, there is a difference between dividing an elephant and dividing a chicken. Nigeria has a population of over 200 million. If you say about 5 out of 100,000 Nigerians die by suicide per year, if you look at the quantum number, it may even be more than the population of a whole country in Africa. So in terms of the quantum number, the people who die of suicide in Nigeria are very large number of people. So it's a crisis situation that we have at hand. And those that are affected are the youth and men, the productive sector of the country, the future of the country. So it is time that the government, take a very proactive step towards addressing this matter. And they have taken that proactive step by adapting a suicide prevention strategic framework for the country, which is embedded within its suicide prevention strategies and the criminalization of suicide in Nigeria.
Doctor, we don't have very much time, but beyond the decriminalization of suicide, what other strategies or tools are organizations like Lifeline relying on to try and bring the numbers down across Africa when it comes to suicide?
Like I said, decriminalization is only the first step. Interventions, especially the ones that Lifeline is well known about, providing helplines, crisis helpline that is toll-free, that people can access help, even within their own rooms, within their houses, without necessarily opening up to other people their, privacy. And help will come, it will be de-escalated, and they will get referral to where further help can be reached. This is technology-based helpline that is toll-free, and Lifeline International has over 200 such helplines across the world and is ready to also deploy such a helpline in Nigeria if we are able to decriminalize suicide and people are able to come out to seek help.
Thank
And
you.
of course,
Dr. Sheikh, unfortunately, Dr. Latif, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for sharing your insight with us, and I really do wish we had more time to explore more deeply, but unfortunately, we do have the constraints of time. We hope to have you back at some point in the future to further examine this issue. Well, moving on, the party of Madagascar's president has denied allegations that it promised money in exchange for votes ahead of last week's elections. And Rajoel is chasing re-election, but most opposition candidates boycotted last week's polls, accusing the leader of having manipulated the process to stack the odds in his favour. Rajoel's also been embroiled in a controversy over the discovery that he'd acquired French nationality in 2014. On Tuesday, dozens of his supporters lined up outside of his party offices in the capital in the belief that they were owed a payout. Final results from last week's presidential vote are due this week. And finally, more than 10% of babies born in South Africa suffer the effects of excessive drinking by their mother during her pregnancy. The country's rate of fetal alcohol spectrum disorder is the highest in the world. Newborns can suffer a range of symptoms from irreversible brain damage to stunted growth. Social workers are trying to do more to raise awareness amongst pregnant women most at risk of turning to alcohol, many of whom are already living harsh lives. Our correspondent tells us more.
Letitia Lawrence is 27. She was diagnosed with the most severe form of fetal alcohol syndrome disorder, a term used to refer to birth defects caused by alcohol exposure during pregnancy. She works in a Cape Town factory where she labels products.
I actually wake up and get ready, and then after that I just brush my teeth, and then I'm ready, and then I'm here, and then I start working. It makes me happy and keeps me busy a lot, and yeah.
Her employer believes in creating a shared workspace for people with disabilities.
Wow, you look after those. Well, I believe that inclusion is the answer. I really think that we need to have a variety of people who work together, and people will see those with disability differently.
Mothers don't need to be heavy drinkers to cause damage to their unborn baby. FASD is detected during early childhood and varies from mild to severe.
So it's actually when the child goes into the toddler years that you can see the delay. The delay might be things like fine motor development. That's what we mostly see in South Africa. In other countries, they're reporting gross motor development. We don't see that as much, but definitely delayed in speech and language.
30% of South African families are affected by FASD, the highest rate globally. At this year's 7th Global Alcohol Policy Conference in Cape Town, campaigners urged the government to strengthen policies on alcohol and substance abuse.
For instance, if we have things like warning labels on liquor bottles, or we have point of sale warnings, which are in liquor serving establishments, it can give more information to the user, and it can not only reduce alcohol use by somebody who may be pregnant, but also by community.
Policies and knowledge about the effects of alcohol alone cannot stop a woman from drinking alcohol during pregnancy. Support from family and the community is equally important.
For Eye on Africa for now, thanks for joining us, though. Do so again if you can. Till then, take care.